types of adventures can you create on the Story City app? Well, I'll go into a couple of examples in a minute. I thought I would talk a little bit to the different ways that you can use Story City to tell interactive stories. So obviously with Story City, we allow branching narratives. We allow that choose your adventure where you can split the direction that you're going to go and you send people off in different directions. We also have the ability to make it so that if you wanted to send people off in different directions, in different pathways, but you wanted them to all end at the same location, but just with a different story or ending depending on where they went through the story, you can actually have all of those endings in the same location, but each one will have a different story ending depending on the pathway that they moved through. So you can do that as well. We can also do things like multiple choice questions if you were doing a puzzle trail, where essentially you can link to internal pages of the app so they don't have to move to a new location when they select the multiple choice. They can literally select it from a button on the screen and then that will take them to the next page to tell them whether or not they were right or wrong. We also have the ability to impart extra information. So if you want to put Easter eggs into your story so that people can dive down the rabbit hole, so say for example, you have a fictional adventure which is set in a park and you want to let people know more about the flora or fauna of the park without interrupting your story with a whole bunch of extra information, you can create hyperlinks that will lead to external pages and then lead back into the adventure so that if people want to dive down the rabbit hole of finding out what a emperor pigeon is or what the ghost tree eucalypt is, they can do so in the story. We then have the ability to turn the map on and off for stories. So if you wanted to give a clue that leads people to the next location and only if they get the clue correct will they end up in the right location and unlock the story, then you can do that and then turn the map on in the next location if you would like. So it will still trigger in the correct location, it's just that they don't have the map to act as a crutch. And while at the moment we can do things like set photo and post challenges for people where they take photographs of themselves acting out scenes or finding something or adding a little bit to the adventure themselves, we can't yet verify that people have done the challenge before they move on, but we're working on adding it to the next version of the app. But the most important thing to remember about all of these is that GPS technology can be unreliable. There are so many different types of phone devices in the world and each one has its own inbuilt GPS hardware. Some of them are good, some of them are pretty poor. So you need to make sure that your locations are at least 50 meters apart and that you don't have to pass within 50 meters of one location to get to the other location. Because in this manner, you will accidentally trigger different locations if the participant happens to have a device that has a poor GPS system. So we always like to let people know that not only should your locations be at least a minimum of 50 meters apart, but if you're doing branching narratives, to make sure that your choices are in opposite directions from each other so that you don't accidentally walk past one choice and trigger it when the person was meaning to go to the other one. But now onto my favorite part about talking about Story City. What are the possibilities of what you could do with this app? Imagine being in Rome and following a historical fiction through the Roman forums, or even a non-fiction walking tour around the Colosseum. Imagine being able to go to London and doing a Harry Potter choose your adventure through King's Cross. Imagine being able to go to Rio when it's not crazy expensive during Carnival and be able to experience that Carnival event through a recorded walking tour where you get to follow one of those Carnival dance troupes through the streets. You could be from the Moulin Rouge in Paris and do a can-can trail through the streets to the Moulin Rouge. Imagine following the New York Ballet through the streets of Manhattan back to the theatre. Imagine being able to walk around Russia with a classical music trail. Imagine a theatre troupe doing an interactive version of Romeo and Juliet using 360 video in Verona. Or a Bollywood documentary through the streets of Mumbai. or a Indigenous myths trail through Alice Springs in Australia. The stories, the medium, the delivery, and the theme are only limited by the imaginations of you, the creatives in their own cities. On the screen, you can see dozens of examples that we have brainstormed of brilliant ways that you can use Story City to tell stories, from interactive choose your own adventures to puzzle trails to scavenger hunts to interactive historic trails and short story trails to dance and 360 video or circus, to things like music videos and oral and local history, to regular walking tours, whether they be food or historical or music. There are so many different ways, whether you are a documentary filmmaker, a filmmaker, whether you are a writer, an artist, a musician, or any other type of creative, to use Story City to create those types of stories that bring people to a location, that help them feel that atmosphere, the emotion, and the joy of being in that particular location. We have all felt that time in our history or our travels or our life where we will go to the waterfall near our house, or we will go to the Eiffel Tower or Broadway, because that location draws us in. It has this gravity that we attach so many stories and meaning to in our lives. So I urge you, whether you want to try out some of the things that we've suggested here as potential stories, or whether you want to explore your own ways of storytelling, whether it to be put people in somebody else's shoes, whether it be getting to people to truly feel or experience a place, whether it just be to bring joy and happiness and adventure to someone. There are so many different ways that you can use text, image, audio, video, 360 to be able to tell the types of stories that not only connect with people and connect with their emotions and empathy, but also ground them in the real world, connect them to our world. So I urge you and I encourage you to be playful, to have fun, to experiment, to try new things, because there are so many different ways that you can use this platform, whether it's non-fiction, like a film tour from behind the scenes of a film or TV show, to fictional stories that grab you by the heartstrings and put you in the shoes of an Anzac soldier off to war or a Vietnam homeless veteran. These are all stories that connect us, that can bring us together, that can help us explore and be curious and empathize with each other. So I hope this gives you a little bit of an insight into the types of things that you can create and the types of directions that your imagination can go. In the next video, we're going to talk about the basics of creating an adventure. Everything from locations to how do you actually structure and make these kind of narratives interactive, whether you're doing non-fiction, fiction, or choose your adventures.